Okay, cool. Just if you could start off and just tell us who you are, and then what organization you work for and what the mission is, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Andy Soper, I work for the Manasseh Project, and our mission is to end the commercial sexual exploitation of minors in West Michigan. And as it turns out, that has been broadened out to kind of include all of Michigan here lately with the referrals that we've been getting for shelter care. So
Okay.
that's more, in a nutshell, that's what we're looking at.
What is your position and title within the Manasseh Project?
Project coordinator. Um,
Okay.
is kind of the position and title. So I think it just fell kind of neatly within their HR ranks. So that's what they went with.
Okay. Very cool. And then you've had that, you said, for 2.5 years?
Yep.
Okay. Very cool. What's your background, in education as far as the Manasseh
Yeah.
Project or?
Nothing to do with social work, actually.
Okay.
I got my bachelor's is in communication,
Okay.
which is not a real degree. So sorry if that is
No, that's not
your
my major. We're good.
all right. With a minor in writing, so that is also not a degree. And then my master's degree is in popular culture
Okay.
from Bowling Green State.
Okay. What are your most significant job responsibilities?
Um, Boy, I think it's kind of twofold as I can see it. I think awareness is a big part of what we do, but I don't kind of see that as the biggest aspect of it.
Okay.
I think the biggest aspect of it was getting the shelter off the ground. There's no specialized shelter care for kids that have been victims of prostitution.
Okay.
So that's probably the biggest part, though. Now that it is up and running, I have less to do with it. We
Okay.
have a supervisor and a therapist and all that, so they run the day to day and do a phenomenal job. The other part, I think, is educating professionals and first responders, that sort of thing. So
Okay.
one doesn't kind of work without the other at this point. So those are the two biggest ones. Though, like I said, I mean, awareness is a huge part, and not so much awareness of that human trafficking happens, but kind of trying to get at the cultural attitudes and behaviors behind what make human trafficking exist. Like, why is it possible? Why does it flourish?
Okay.
So trying to get at those attitudes is another pretty important aspect.
I mean, so you basically already talked about kind of the fundamental issue that you're trying to address. And I mean, you talked a lot about the culture and how it's really kind of changing the culture, but changing the legislative side too.
Right.
Um, how are you utilizing technology to do this?
Well, I think we go through kind of, I don't know, I guess they're not traditional in that they're only a couple of years old, but like
Okay.
traditional social feeds, right? So we're talking about Twitter and we're talking about Facebook. We've used Pinterest a little bit,
Okay.
especially around our prize with the imagery. But I think you know it's difficult for me to when I think about how we use technology. I feel like we're fairly traditional. Um, there's nothing kind of instinctive about or new that we're developing. I try to keep it as simple as possible. At the same time, technology just allows us to reach a larger community, right?
Mhm.
So when we put things on Facebook or whatever, it's not just kind of, hey, we're going to such and such high school today, right? The idea there is to not just look at who likes it, but actually say, okay, what are they liking it because they like the cause or whatever, or do they have a specific interest? And then actually following up with that person.
Okay.
I still see us largely as a grassroots organization. So that's kind of what we have to do with those small things is pay attention to the 25 likes that you might get on Facebook and really follow up with that. Noticing, I mean, we do a lot of work with the insight type of stuff on Facebook and Twitter to see what's getting retweeted or see what's getting special attention to be like, why is that particularly, is it because the story was particularly salacious, or is it because something that it was a positive story? People actually want to hear good news, stuff like that. We need to be kind of, I think, the trafficking field is rife with hyperbole. There's very little practicality when it comes to, what you'll hear is really big statistics, or you'll hear the most horrific stories out there. So rather than focus on that, we use technology to either tell a good story or tell something that allows people to not only just track what we're doing, but find spots where they can fit in. Yeah, so I don't know if that's a great answer, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
use technology for we had to kind of at one point we thought about the type of technology we were using for presentations. I'm not super adept at. I guess I take Steve Jobs very seriously, right? So we're going to have visuals, and we're going to have a very compelling story or rationale behind what we're doing.
Okay.
But throwing gobs of words and concepts at people doesn't really do the job.
Hmm.
So our presentations, in terms of technology, and I've actually I feel like I've gotten some flack for this recently, is that we don't put a whole lot of like I'll get up to speak and I'll speak for 3 straight hours, and I will give you so much information you'll feel like you're taking a drink out of a fire hose essentially.
Hmm.
But visually we keep it incredibly simple. We choose a lot of street art to get our point across. So if we're talking about street youth, we're gonna there's a couple Banksy photos that we've used to really kind of bring out the concept of what it is to be a street youth, rather than throw up statistics of 1.6 million runaways every year and 40% of the homeless youth population is LGBT and put this up in big letters. Try to get people drawn into that conversation visually, and so very focused on simple visuals and very complex truths, I guess. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I struggled with this, like when you first asked, like, man, how do we use technology? I feel like it's pretty traditional outside of, I don't feel like we try to do too much with it. Like, when I think of grassroots, I don't think of movements that have been started on Facebook or Twitter and catch a lot of, like, I think of like Coney 2012, where that, it was all about YouTube and Facebook that drove that.
Yeah.
But I've asked myself the question, what the hell happened with that? It's gone. It was a sensation, but the people that we're trying to reach, I'm not trying to reach a mass market. I'm trying to reach 15 people that actually care and are willing to step out and do it. And because we've done it that way, and tried to be much more tactile than technological, I feel like it's done us a good service.
Has your utilization of technology, has it changed over the last 2.5 years, or has it been kind of like the same?
It really picked up when we decided to do Art Prize. I kind of got forced into the situation where, during Art Prize, everything is so chaotic and so big. Everybody's trying to get noticed. That we did a really kind of large campaign on the street, but people wanted to follow it, right? So like we had to change the way we interacted on Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and LinkedIn and all those things, because people were looking for, oh, I saw this on the street, so what's my next step? And we had to be very like kind of cognizant of, okay, what is your next step? Because now you're following us because you were interested, but unless we catch you here, we're going to lose you. So those follow-up things looked a lot different, and they actually served us well, going from something like Art Prize, which was this big kind of glitzy thing, to the 6 weeks after Art Prize, where we had an education step for each one of the root causes of trafficking that we identified during Art Prize, and we were able to get 480 people to come out and get educated afterwards. And these weren't repeat customers, right? Maybe 10 people went to all 6 of them, but we were getting these large audiences through social media to come out to these events. So it was a little bit different then. I think we really had to change our approach to it. Sometimes it almost feels like burdensome to me because I'm the one who has to do it.
Yeah.
And that can get terribly old. So it devolves into, okay, I'm just going to update on where I am or what I'm doing, rather than being like, okay, here's an opportunity for you to act. I feel like I follow a lot of people on Twitter. A lot of it is less about motivation and more about a good story. So I try to follow those people that are telling good stories. So when I catch myself not telling a good story, I never question why 5 people are following a certain story. It's because I've kind of lost what technology is about, which is good narrative. And in my opinion, as it relates to what we're doing, like telling that good story, telling it in a way that people can hear. Otherwise, it's it gets lost. It's just a coin and is mixed in with everything else.
Yeah, I told you this is for a project, in school and
Right.
everything like that. But as far as what is our next step, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to see this video, and I mean, if I have your permission, of course, I'm going to share this with other people too.
Sure.
what is people's next step? I mean, what can they do to help this problem, help you stop the problem? I mean, what can
Sure.
we do?
Well, the first step in anything is education, right? So if we do nothing else through this video, it's allow people to say, okay, if this much attention is drawn to human trafficking, right? It can either be one of two things. It's either sexy, and so people are wanting to pay attention to it, or there's actually a problem, and it's like an obligation. You have to engage it at some point. So as I think of next steps, right? There's so much information out there to go and educate yourself on. What I would encourage is that rather than focusing on the most horrific stories or the most horrific statistics, you find that middle ground and you say, okay, if the problem isn't sex with minors, right? That's a symptom of the problem. What the bigger problem is how we're viewing sexuality. What the bigger problem is how we view consumption, right? So once you've educated yourself on the problem where it exists, right? So sex trafficking of minors exists because we've commodified a child. We've said sexuality is more about power and my well-being rather than a mutual relationship where we're both benefiting and there's some sort of intimacy there. So you start to look at your habits and say, okay, what type of media do I take in on a daily basis that promotes an unhealthy idea of sexuality and power? And I add power in there because so often women are stripped of power in our advertising and our media, all sorts of things like that. So begin to really start to view what you're taking in critically and saying, is this healthy for me and is it healthy for the person on the other end of the screen? As it relates to consumption, right, the majority of trafficking in the world, though you rarely hear it, is labor trafficking. Sex trafficking gets followed a lot more because, like I said, it's a little bit more sexy. But I feel confident in saying that you and your fellow students would outside of maybe pornography, never have paid for sex, right? Never paid for an actual sex act. But I guarantee that all of us, myself included, have products that are made with either slave-made materials or source material that, somebody who's forced into the work, whether it's a child or a woman or a man, forced to mine or forced to harvest or whatever the case might be. We all are implicit in that. So what I'm asking you to do is fundamentally impractical. You have to change the way you consume. So that's what kind of coffee you drink, what kind of chocolate you eat, what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of technology and you take in terms of what computer you buy, right? People made a big deal when Mac got called out for people like killing themselves in their factories and their working conditions being horrible. That's true, and I'm not trying to defend Mac here, but 95% of the world's computers are through Microsoft, and they have a horrible human rights record. So, it was kind of a sexy thing, like Mac tries to paint itself in one way, and yet the reality was another. We really have to re-examine, and once you re-examine, like, you start to find, oh my gosh, this feels like it's impossible, like it can't get away from it. So then what we've done, my family, is find the products that we love, right, that we kind of, on an everyday basis, we use. Really do the research, going to websites like freetowork.org or slaveryfootprint.org, and say, okay, what is really this product about?